I put a brief presentation together on some data points that I'm sure all of the learned audience today knows in terms of what the mission is doing, what the ecosystem is at, and just some sort of data points as such to get structure into what the sector is doing at the moment, right? But the most important thing would be the final 2 slides of this presentation, which is a segue to the next panel that I'm hoping to moderate, is on industry challenges and industry accelerators. So everyone knows, of course, that there's a cost gap, and there are sectoral challenges, there are sectoral drivers to uptake of green hydrogen. There are challenges when it comes to manufacturing of the new technologies as such in a market like India, and there are such drivers as such, giving both headwinds and tailwinds to the sector. But nevertheless, I think it's important for us to look at complementing the government, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and the associated ministries who've been a part of the National Green Hydrogen Mission since January 2023, since its launch. So over the last 2 years of its existence, the National Green Hydrogen Mission, of course, has a $2.4 billion outlay, out of which $2.1 billion goes towards the incentives, both, or let's say all three, on the electrolyzer manufacturing front, as well as on the production of green hydrogen, as well as green ammonia. Now, we've had, of course, the SITE program within this as an instrument of deploying these funds into different projects. And what we've seen, which I will demonstrate on the subsequent slide, is that we've seen an overwhelming response to both of these, or let's say all of these different tenders over the course of the last year. We have a lot of enabling factors as well that many companies here, both developers as well as manufacturers, have enjoyed from when it comes to R&D, when it comes to facilitative interventions. The green ports, the green steel components of the mission are unique in that it moves the sector from 0 to 1 when it comes to adopting green hydrogen as such, in these different use cases. But I think the most important aspect that, some of the most important aspects that I would like to highlight, in addition to what Mr. Bhalla mentioned in terms of the success of the National Green Hydrogen Mission itself, is that we've seen multiple tenders. We've seen both the green hydrogen tenders. We've seen a green ammonia tender, which is live, the 739 KTPA one, which is tied up to fertilizer companies for consumption. We've seen the 2 tenders on the electrolyzer manufacturing front, cumulating to 3 gigawatts as well. The beautiful part of these is that there are 2 aspects. One, all of these tenders have been oversubscribed. The tenders which have closed, of course, barring the green ammonia tender so far. But the electrolyzer manufacturing tender and the green hydrogen tenders have been oversubscribed, which means there's more interest in the market from a supply point of view than there is in terms of the demand. The demand will come, as former Secretary Sir mentioned, the willingness to pay in different sectors, the policy drivers in different sectors, the decarbonization intention, let's say, in different use cases, are all various complexities that each sector would have to battle against, their own selves. But the point is, from a supply point of view, the Indian ecosystem is more than ready. Let me jump to the next one. So this is the output, of course, of the green hydrogen production incentives. The 2 tenders, tranche 1 and 2. This cumulated to, if I remember right, 862,000 tons worth of green hydrogen production, which is quite a large capacity, about 18 to 20% of our overall 5 million ton target of green hydrogen equivalent. And the good thing over here, what at least I take out of this, is that we've seen, as I mentioned, an oversubscription. We've seen companies apply for the incentives, not at the highest level, but lower than what was promised within the tenders as the maximum incentive, which means the bridge on the cost gap that they're looking to fulfill from these incentives as such wouldn't be the 50, 40, 30 rupee equivalent, but would be lower than that. The third important takeaway is that we've seen a good mix, I would say, between large renewable energy developers, some large oil and gas companies, as well as younger companies who don't have that large footprint at the moment, aka startups. And we've seen good combination of both electrolyzer manufacturers as well as green hydrogen producers on that respect. And that, I think, shows the maturity that the Indian ecosystem wants to get to as well very soon. When it comes to electrolyzer manufacturing, again similar, both the tranches have been indeed oversubscribed. The same parameters in terms of the younger startups as such, as well as the more experienced manufacturers in the space, many of whom are of course sitting in the audience today. But the main points over here, to note of course, is that we've seen large green hydrogen developers and renewable energy developers looking at integrating themselves within the manufacturing ecosystem. Companies like Reliance or of course Greenco with the John Cochrane partnership, Jindal India or Wari, for instance, Matrix Gas are all users or large merchant hopefuls, let's say, within the green hydrogen ecosystem, who are looking at vertical integration to manufacturing as well. And that again, matures the ecosystem in a very different and formidable way. This is perhaps the most important takeaway in our opinion. The highlighted slices of the pie, let's say, are companies who are indeed playing in both the spaces, manufacturing as well as merchant generation, right? So you have, Greenco, for instance, of course, with AM Green, with Zero C, with John Cochrane, all the three subsidiaries or joint ventures. Greenco has 1,700 crores or 180, $200 million worth of an incentive within the site program so far. Reliance, Wari, L&T, GH2 Solar are all such companies who have won incentives in both the schemes, manufacturing of electrolyzers as well as merchant generation of hydrogen and ammonia. And this shows that integrated approach that I talked about earlier as well. You have, of course, not just the site program, but you have developments in the ecosystem by both manufacturers as well as merchants outside of the site program also. There are several companies who've chosen to go without participating in the site program, who are still looking at large-scale manufacturing and development of projects, which is another very important data point to have in the story that we're trying to build, that given the incentives, it's interesting to look at bridging costs, but even without that, there is a formidable development in the sector with companies going beyond the site tender as well. I leave it here in terms of what I'm looking to gain out of the panel. Again, I want to keep it very interactive with all the participants, is to look at deep diving into what we feel would be the gaps between the intentions within the green hydrogen mission and the execution in terms of on-ground development as well. What are those gaps? Let's go deep dive. Let's deep dive into factors that, of course, all of us know the headlines of. But let's understand from the developers and the manufacturers how ready the projects indeed are on the ground. How attractive are the state subnational policies? How ready is the supply chain and the domestic demand of all of this? And those are important factors, I think, which should come out, from a wholesome discussion in the panel. We'll talk about costs, we'll talk about willingness to pay, and we'll then most importantly finish with a more positive note, saying that there are challenges, but what do we as policymakers, as industry bodies, as developers, as manufacturers, what do we do to accelerate the ecosystem going forward? What do we do to actually implement the 7.5 million ton green hydrogen announced target that former Secretary Sir mentioned? How do we lay the first bricks on the ground? How do we get those capacities commissioned? And those are accelerators in the industry, which I'm hoping to deliberate with yourselves on as well. So with that brief presentation, I will leave you with it.